And The Dish Ran Away with a Spoon, Part 1, is the first episode of Season 8 of Frasier. This is directed by Pamela Fryman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And it's a really exciting episode, but there are also some negative emotions from a lot of characters, as one could expect. It starts off where the last episode ended, with Daphne going into the Winnebago, asking Niles if he's free for a date, and off they go. And they drive the Winnebago and get as far as the end of the driveway and realise that they have to face the music. So they go back, and they were quite creative with the next bit, because we see Niles and Daphne telling Donny and Mel, but technically we don't, because we're looking at Niles and Daphne from the perspective of Mel and Donny, which was interesting. It was a little bit unnecessary, but it was fine. And then we cut to Frasier, Martin, Niles, and Daphne in the car driving away from the wedding. And there's definitely comedy in that scene, but it's unclear how we're meant to feel as viewers, because on the one hand, how absolutely amazing that finally, after years and years and years, Daphne and Niles are finally together. But also, two people have just been left, one at the altar, one a few days after their wedding. So there's a heavy atmosphere, but there's also a lot of joy with Niles and Daphne. It's very confusing with how I should be feeling, but it worked really, really well. We're back at the apartment. Rhoze is helping Daphne send back wedding gifts. Simon's still around, which is unnecessary, but it's fine. And then Niles and Daphne are in the kitchen, and it's so sweet. And he tells Frasier that they are, and I quote, deliriously happy. And it's so obvious. But because they're happy, it's very clear that something bad has to happen. And there it is. Donny is suing Daphne for the wedding, for emotional damages. And yes, I do think she should be responsible for paying some of the wedding. In fact, I never think one person should be solely responsible for the cost of a wedding anyway, but either way, I can understand that. But serving her like that's a quick turnaround. First of all, that is some fast work. It's only been a day. Very, very quickly done. But I don't think it was the best way to handle the situation on Donny's part. But at the same time, I can't even begin to imagine how he's feeling, so I also kind of don't blame him. Frasier goes to sea. Probably not Frasier's best decision, but at the same time, he does take some of the heat away from Daphne by making Donny realise that he was kind of partly responsible for this by telling Daphne and Niles, basically making them both aware of each other's feelings the day before the wedding. So really, it's all Frasier's fault. But at the same time, taking some of that heat away from Daphne may be a good idea. Again, Donny was acting very unhinged, but again, I don't blame him. And then we're at Cafe Nervosa, and Mel arrives. She's wearing all black. Niles is wearing black as well, actually, which is quite interesting. I think it was an interesting decision, because Mel is clearly mourning their 4-day marriage. I completely forgot until Mel pointed it out that this was their 4-day anniversary. I forgot just how soon before the wedding they got married. And it was in that moment that I realised, yeah, maybe this is the one time Mel gets to be really bitter, because she's not a nice person. She's not a nice character. She's clearly self-centered. She's not a good person. But on this occasion, I think all of her demands are kind of reasonable. And Niles is going along with it as well. Niles realises that, yeah, maybe on this occasion her demands are fair enough, and Niles has to go to all of these functions with her, including one for their wedding, which is going to be massively awkward. And we end the episode. It's quite a quick episode. Not a lot happens, but I feel like there were so many loose ends that we needed to start tying together, but there are still some dangling. We end the episode with Martin pointing out that both Frasier and Niles will be getting their nuptials toasted, and then it says to be continued. I will say that ending was very, very abrupt. It felt like they'd created one long episode for the 2 parts and then just cut it down the middle. It didn't feel like the end of an episode, even with to be continued there. So it felt really, really abrupt, but it's not a huge issue. I'm looking forward to the next one. I remember reasonably well what happens next, but it's been a while since I've seen it, so I'm looking forward to rewatching it. And I think this episode does give us some satisfaction in tying up the one major loose end of, will they actually run away from the wedding? Would they realize that actually this isn't the right thing. And I think all of the right decisions were made in the context. Obviously, leaving somebody at the altar is never usually the right decision. I feel like if you're having cold feet, you need those conversations before that point. But once they got to the Winnebago, or once Daphne got in the Winnebago, from my perspective as a viewer and a fan of Daphne and Niles, I think the right decisions were made. But not everything's wrapped up in one episode, and I think that feels quite realistic. If they just launched season 8 with Daphne and Niles together, Mel and Donny are in the past, and there are no questions unanswered, I feel like it would be not very realistic. So I think they managed to give us information, but still leave us hanging a little bit here. And we have a nice balance of comedy and love and happiness for Daphne and Niles, but we're still being reminded of what they kind of did. So it's a little awkward, and it's rather well done. Also, why isn't this called The Dish Ran Away with the Moon? That would have made so much more sense. Unless I'm missing something revolving around spoons. I might be. I don't know. I feel like just giving The Dish Ran Away with the Moon would have been a nice play on words there. Either way, it's a decent episode. Also, according to the internet, every scene with Eddie is Enzo going forward because Moose had retired at this point, which is rather sweet. But at least I no longer need to play the game of, is this Moose or is this Enzo? Because sometimes I can't tell. I can only tell them apart when they're together, when they're in photographs together. I can then tell them apart. But when it's just one of them on screen, I really can't. I mean, they got very lucky with the fact that one of Moose's puppies, looked so much like him. Very, very cute. But I thought that was interesting as well. And in general, decent episode, solid start to season 8. Can't wait to watch the next episode.